Hi again, everybody. I'm Jamie Allison, and this is the Big Idea, Big Moves podcast. This is the destination for high performers. We talk to people from different genres, different niches, just people doing really interesting things in their space, find out a little bit about what they're doing, what their journey is, and hopefully take away some tips that we can apply to our own lives as well. So we talk to lots of athletes, we talk to entrepreneurs, we talk to CEOs, we've even talked to astronauts and scientists. So lots of neat individual people that are just doing really impactful things. So I know I have one of those today. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you'll also know that we have a relationship with Thirdsy, and a lot of people, whether they're entrepreneurs, athletes, all of those people that just are struggling a bit with maybe getting some sleep. We also know that's when you build back muscle, you improve your athletic performance, and increase productivity in what you do the next day too. Sometimes that can be tough, and Thirdsy has a PM recovery collagen, which is important because it is all natural. It's got nutrients, amino acids, but it's got no melatonin or sedatives, anything like those in it as well. So it is really just something to take a look at. Lots of high performance athletes are using it, but also people that are just trying to recover for the next day and be more productive. So you can go to either their website, which is thirdsy.com, or go directly into our Instagram profile, and you'll see a link through there, and you can use a discount code. It's BIBM20, and you get 20% off anything if it is right for you. So definitely take a look at it and see. So really happy to have Kayti Simonson with us today. She is a big force, both in and out of the athletic arena. So she's a lawyer, but has an extensive athletic background as well. She's a hybrid athlete. She's been competing in some of those high adrenaline events, which we'll talk a little bit about as well. But she has excelled in both high level academic and athletic achievement. So we talk a lot about kind of whole life success. And, she obviously has those things kind of connected here because she competed in the NCAA as a hurdler and a soccer player and went on to play semi-pro soccer as well. But also did that while getting her undergraduate degree and some post-grad qualifications as well. So she's heavily involved in those things and actually went to the Hyrox World Championships recently too. So some really interesting stuff that I know we're going to touch on today. But first of all, I'm sure with all of those things going on, taking the time out to chat with us today, really appreciate it, Kayti.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Why don't we start, instead of going right back, let's just start with, I know you earlier on kind of in the year went to the Hyrox World Championships, and there's probably some people on here. I know there's some that know Hyrox pretty well. There's probably some that don't know it a whole lot as of yet, but maybe what's that experience been like for you? Because you've really kind of went into that a fair amount, but also going to the World Championships and doing that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, what that was like for you?
It was fantastic. It's a world championship, so it's hard not to be really
Sure.
excited about it. I raced individually,
Hmm.
which means I did the entire race by myself because you can race individually, doubles, or team relay.
Hmm.
And then at the end of the weekend, I also raced for Team Canada in
Yeah.
the mixed relay, which was probably the highlight of the weekend. It
Yeah.
was wild.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you came in seventh in both, didn't you? Or at least in
Yes.
yeah. So
Yeah, actually seventh in both. Seventh in my age group and then seventh in the Canada or country, I guess, elite relay.
yeah, yeah, very cool when you think of the people that, especially in the relay, not just for your team, but the other teams that you're racing against. There are some pretty high level people and really cool people to be able to be racing against. I would assume at that level too.
Everyone's incredible.
Yeah,
Like just the best of the best, obviously, if they're being picked to be on their country's relay team. And I know that some people don't know a lot about High Rocks. If you do, you understand what a commitment it is in order to
yeah.
train for it. But these athletes are just unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah. We've had a few of them on here, and like Megan and Lauren Weeks, and a couple of those
Yeah.
people have been on, so they would have been people that you'd know well from that. But I guess why what made you kind of gravitate towards High Rocks recently? Because I know you do other things too, but it's a different type of sport to be able to train for. Like you mentioned, it's you do have to be pretty committed to it, but it also is probably different than some of the other sports that are because endurance is a pretty heavy part of that as well. Has it changed how you train? But what is it also that was appealing about it?
So it's very different than any training that I have done in the past. I was a
Mm-hmm.
400 hurdler, which
Hmm.
involves sprint and power work, and then soccer. There's an endurance aspect to it for sure, but it's just different. A lot of
Yeah,
skill work as well.
yeah,
2-ish years ago, year and a half ago, I felt like I needed to be challenged, especially with everything that was happening in the world. It just felt as though I'd kind of become complacent, not
yeah,
necessarily of my own volition. It just, that's how things played out.
yeah,
And I felt like I needed to be challenged. I saw this race on Instagram, of course,
yeah.
as I find out about everything. And I signed up for the North American Championships that were a couple weeks later,
Hmm.
severely underestimating how difficult this race was. I
Yeah,
thought if I could play a 90-minute soccer game and I did CrossFit for years competitively, then how bad can this be?
yeah,
And I have learned that, yeah, it's very hard. And my training has changed significantly in order
yeah.
to perform in it.
Yeah, and I do think that happens a lot of the time because you do see some crossover athletes trying high rocks now and seeing that, oh, okay, it's not a quick and easy, move over, and it is a very different kind of thing. So, um, let's go back a little bit then too. Is that you mentioned that you did hurdles and soccer competitively when you were in school. But at the same time, you're doing, all of those things to make sure you get your degree and do all of the academic stuff. How did, a lot of people probably are like wonder how do you do that at an elite level, and then also do what would be a pretty demanding kind of background to be in law to be able to do those things together. What was that like, and how did you find being able to do it? Like, what did you do to be able to get through that?
So when I was competing in university, um, I, oh God, I can't sit still.
Yeah,
I can't
yeah,
sit still, but on the same token, I've always had this belief that why do I have to not do one thing in order to do something else? Why can't I
yeah,
do both if I'm willing to make sacrifices elsewhere in my life? So was my social life, was spring break this or that? No, I was training, I was studying. Uh, I it requires a lot of sacrifice.
yeah,
I think achieving anything requires a lot of sacrifice. But for me, I loved setting goals, hitting goals. I knew that I wanted my degrees. I've wanted to be a lawyer since I was 13, but I love being an athlete and competing. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure out some way to let me do both
yeah.
uh, in, I guess, the highest level possible. So now, balancing being a lawyer and a Hyrox athlete, I mean, I train 20 plus hours a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, once
Wow.
again, we're back to sacrifice, but I keep
Yeah.
things very, very simple.
Hmm.
Anything that's not contributing to my physical, mental well-being and my goals, I just say no to it.
Hmm.
Like it just is kind of a definitive line for me. If someone's
Yeah.
like, yeah, let's go out Saturday, party, whatever, and I have training the next morning, I'm like, I'll come till 9, I'll be sober, but like I gotta be in
Yeah.
bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's come to that.
it's interesting because we had a recent conversation, and it was a discussion about you have to be aware of what you are willing to sacrifice, and that's some people, like, it depends on what you're, what's happening in your own life and all of those things as well. Um, but when you mentioned goal setting around that, how do you approach that yourself? Like, do you look at kind of all of it holistically? Do you look at, okay, here's my athletics, this is what I want to do, and then everything kind of fits around that, or here's my job, here's what I want to do, and mesh the two of them together? Like, are you a write your goals down kind of person? How does that work for you, Kitty?
I'm not a write my goals down kind of person. I
Yeah,
journal regularly, but I don't have my vision board.
yeah,
I I set a very big, broad goal.
hmm,
For example, I want to be the best Hyrox athlete in the world. You know, something that's like just huge and just up there. And then I'll break it down smaller things. Like I want to hit these race times consistently. I want to hit this in practice. And those little milestones make it easier to work towards the bigger goal.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my focus. And then with work, I've been very fortunate to structure kind of a very unique work system being a
Mhm.
lawyer and
Mhm.
surround myself with mentors and lawyers that really support me being an athlete because they think it actually contributes to my success as a lawyer.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned mentors there that from a profession standpoint, um, do you have mentors in kind of do you pick up little bits from a bunch of different people? Do you have a couple of people that you look to all the time? What's that like for you from that standpoint, whether it's professionally but also outside of that as well, maybe in sports or other parts of life?
In sport, I feel like I'm mentored slash inspired by literally everyone who's just trying. Because I'm
Hmm.
like, oh my God, you're working so hard. That's so cool. I can work hard. I can work harder. You're working harder. Like, and it just pushes me. Um, so whenever I see someone on Instagram just like that achieved something or tried something new, I'm like, oh yes, cool. Professionally, I've been very fortunate to have a mentor who's the head litigator at a very excellent firm
Hmm.
who's just really taken me under his wing. I think he thinks I'm a little crazy, and that's why, because kind of
Yeah,
just showed up at his office one day and I was like, I know you're the best, teach me things.
yeah,
Uh, so, and then beyond that, I mean, my dad is my biggest mentor, hands down. He's the pinnacle of hard work and integrity. So I look to him for pretty much everything.
yeah, yeah. And when you're trying to figure out, you've got all of these things going on that probably have I mean, your athletics probably have a pretty specific nutritional kind of um, not a plan or however you do that, but you also, if you're doing long hours at work, which your profession is probably one of those ones from time to time, you have to do that too. Um, how do you balance that, or how do you make sure that you're doing the right thing to fuel your body at a time when you're training and also maybe having to work at odd hours and everything else too?
Oh God, I work so many odd hours.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah.
get an email from me at midnight. It's okay. I'm fine. That's standard. Again, it comes back to simplicity.
Yeah.
I keep things pretty consistent. I eat so much cereal, like just so much, because I need carbs. So I eat so much cereal, and then I drink Fairlife milk, which is just such great high protein milk. So I'm like, oh, carbs, protein,
You're done.
kind of cereal, and then meat. I simplify everything. I pack my lunches to go to the gym. I pack my dinners to go to work. Like it just, anytime I can remove elements of uncertainty that might throw you off a little bit, I try to.
Yeah, yeah. And I've noticed recently because you might be training heavily for Hyrox, but you do other things still too, because I noticed, you were mountain biking not long ago and things like that. Which I'm sure are complementary, but is that something you do kind of on a whim, or is it hey, that's part of my training for, maybe endurance for Hyrox or whatever it is, and I just I would assume you're competitive and like to do the competitive things, but
Yeah.
why, how does that fit in, or what does that look like for you?
I think I'll throw things like that in like mountain biking or bouldering at the rock climbing gym or something like
Yeah,
that because training still has to be fun in some capacity. Like it can't just be the same thing every single day constantly. Otherwise, even though physically maybe it's benefiting you mentally, you just kind of want to bash your head into a wall after a certain point.
yeah,
So
yeah,
mixing things up, I think actually, as long as it's not completely detracting away from your performance,
yeah,
actually really benefits you. So getting out to the mountains and biking, I mean, I'm not going down any blacks. I'm not reckless.
yeah.
But biking around a mountain is fun. So it keeps me more mentally, emotionally healthy. And that's why I mix it in there.
And I notice you like traveling a lot, and that might be partially because of, where you're going for your competitions and things like that, but that's probably also by choice sometimes.
Much as it
So
can be.
yeah, like, is that something that you're passionate about and that kind of develops into that, or like, do you figure out, hey, I want to go here, and there just happens to be something that kind of meshes nicely, or is it just like is it that's where the event was and that's why you went?
Right now, a lot of the time, that's where the event was.
Yeah,
Worlds last year was in the south of France. So
yeah,
awesome.
rough.
Can't
Yeah.
complain about that. But no, I love to learn. So going to a new city that I've never been and exploring, oh, it's so much fun to me. And I really like food. I know I eat a lot of cereal, but like I
Yeah.
love food.
Yeah.
So if I can go test out different countries, cities, and eat all their food, that makes me really happy.
Well, south of France, and I know you like croissants,
Oh
so
my
that
God.
must have been, definitely helps if you're in the actual spot of origin for croissants. That's not bad.
There was a croissant shop across from my Airbnb. And the first time I walked in, they're like, okay, random Canadian girl. I can speak a little French. It's not good, but I can order a croissant.
Yeah.
And they looked at me like, oh, sweetie, terrible French. Here's your croissant. And I went back like 15 times over the next 4 days. And they're like, oh, dear God, she has a problem.
Well, I think a lot of Canadians would because I think when they go there, it's pastries and things like that that are the reason you stay and keep going back every time. So. Um, one other thing that I thought was interesting, Katie, is that you speak a lot about community and the community that comes with that. I mean, if you're in some of those sports that you've done, whether it's Hyrox or CrossFit or even mountain biking, some of those things, it's a very kind of tight-knit community that develops around some of those things. But it's also something that kind of is nurtured a bit when you're going through this and people are doing things on Instagram and stuff like that. So do you have ways like is that something I think that do you thrive off of that? Is it something you just have to kind of you have to do because it is kind of one of those things that everybody kind of knows everybody in some of those sports? What is that like for you?
The Hyrox community is interesting. It's tight-knit, but it's also not because it's so global.
Hmm.
But for every sport I've played, I've actually found the Hyrox community to be the most supportive. They just like soccer, track, CrossFit. It can be a little cutthroat. People can be kind of mean,
Sure.
but Hyrox that's part of why I love it because it shocked me so much at how supportive and wonderful people are, even when you're competing directly against them.
Yeah.
So that community aspect actually makes it more enjoyable. Like I get to go to races and see my friends, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool. I'm not just here to compete. I actually get to socialize and engage with people that now mean a lot to me, which I never would have expected coming in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the other thing is that you've been in sports that High Rocks is it's a newer sport, I guess, in kind of the concept behind it. Um, do you see there are lots of prominent females in that sport, and which I think you're starting to see some of that happening in other more traditional kind of sports. But do you see a difference, I guess, from that end? Is that there seems to at least be a movement that people are understanding, like being a strong a strong woman is a good thing, and that being in those sports and being prominent and getting the same kind of publicity and opportunities that and it shouldn't matter what gender you are, you're an athlete. But have you seen that change, and do you see it changing further in the next little while?
Yeah, I've always been kind of the type of person that I love being fit and healthy and strong.
Yeah,
So if someone didn't like that, I give zero fucks.
yeah, yeah,
But in this community, yeah, it's such a great thing. People are so supportive. Like you get compliments for being jacked. Like it's
yeah,
awesome. People are stoked. That's the goal, is to
yeah,
be as fit and as strong as and healthy as possible. So it actually fosters more of an incentive to keep doing it because people aren't trying to, I guess, tear you down
yeah,
for not looking, I guess, I don't want to say traditional because I don't know traditional is the right word, but
yeah.
not looking like you're not capable of lifting a couple hundred pounds.
Yeah, yeah, it really interesting because I find even globally, it's different depending on where you're from and where you are. We had Annie Thorisdottir on at one point and asked her a
Awesome.
similar question, and she said, I never realized there was anything until I went to North America or other places where there was a different kind of thinking around it. Because she said, like in Iceland, nobody would think anything. If I went over to
Really.
Northern Europe, people wouldn't have thought anything of it. But it is interesting how those cultural impacts, hopefully, they're changing, but you do see more of it. So it's good that you're saying that you see some of that, I guess, from that standpoint.
I
Um,
mean,
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
I find if someone's not stoked about whatever you're doing, then that's something that they need to work through
Yeah.
personally. Because, like, why would you care?
Yeah,
Don't you have
exactly.
enough going on in your own life to care about? Why do you care about some random
Maybe
person who
not. Maybe
biceps?
that's why. They don't have as packed full lives as you might have. Um,
Yeah, I got nothing.
and so, actually, that is one thing that we talk about because we talk a lot about having kind of whole life success because we have a lot of entrepreneurs or CEOs and things that maybe do a lot in one area and miss out on other parts of their life as well, or don't think through kind of having some of that. Like what does that mean to you? Because you said like some people that we've talked to have said it depends on your season of life and everything kind of changes depending on kind of what you're doing. How do you look at it from that standpoint? It's like, what is success to you when you look at all of those things, not just success athletically or success in your job? What does that mean to you?
Uh, to me, I think it's being fulfilled, not necessarily winning races or becoming partner at my firm. It's, do I go to sleep at night feeling like I'm enjoying my life, like I'm challenging myself, like I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone, and I'm bettering the people around me. If I can better the people around me while also trying to grow myself and be like the best version of myself, then that is as successful as it could get. I,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And so in your being a lawyer and going through that, I mean, a lot of people are probably listening, thinking, "Wow, okay, that's a you have to have a lot of dedication to do that, as well as what you've done outside of that." Is there something that jumped out at you when you've went through this path a little bit that you thought, "Wow, this was a lot harder than I thought it would be," or this would be, that was something that's way more, it took tons more energy to understand this than I thought it would be when I started out down that path.
Oh my God, yes. I severely underestimated how hard it is to run a legit 10K time.
Mm,
I well, I'm on a distance, well, I wasn't a distance runner. Now it's a lot more comfortable.
right.
It's more within my realm now. But starting out, I'm like, oh, like how bad can it be? How hard can it be?
Yeah.
And all these athletes, most of them have endurance backgrounds. So that part is a lot more comfortable, comes more naturally to them. They've put in years and years of work, and I hadn't. So to realize, oh, this is going to take a hot minute to develop. I
Yeah.
can't just all of a sudden cut 10 minutes off my 10K time in a couple months. But I mean, like you know it, but you also don't know it.
Yeah.
So it humbles you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that one got me.
That's probably the big one. Okay. And so just so people can understand too, from that standpoint, is what does the season kind of look like, that you prep for and kind of those things for people that maybe aren't fully understanding of how kind of the Hyrox season works because they're events worldwide. That's what's really kind of interesting about it now and growing exponentially too. So what does that look like for you? Like, do you have certain events that you want to be in and place in now, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the World Championships are every June. Qualifying for that is obviously the goal. There's races all year, but usually after June, you take a little bit of time off
Yeah.
because training is so demanding. And then you go into base season, whenever it is, you go into base season. Most people don't start racing again until the fall,
Mhm.
October, November, maybe even December.
Yeah.
And then you race handful of races, whatever you need or want to, until World Championships the following June.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then there's a handful of qualifying races to get into the Elite 15. Those are 4 times a year. So a lot of people that want to race in that will schedule around those. And
Right. Right.
yes.
Yeah. And is that difficult knowing, I guess you have the ability to shift things a little around a little bit, I guess, with your job. So that's a good thing that you can structure those things relatively easily for you.
I am so fortunate that I can work remotely the
Yeah.
majority of the time, barring a court appearance that's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as I show up to whatever I need to, my bosses are like, okay, yeah, whatever. You're there, great. Just be online when you need to be online.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm very
And
lucky.
so, one of the things that we always try to do with anybody that comes on is leave a couple things with the audience, and I know a few. We've already gone through some of those, Katie, but one of them, I just find anybody who's listening that here's all the stuff you're doing, and I think would love to be able to kind of mimic that or take some things away from how you juggle those things. Do you have some tips for somebody who's maybe struggling with that a little bit about maybe knowing that okay, I'm really full all in on my job, but I'm not doing what I want to do in the other parts of my life, whether that's in my fitness or athletics or whatever it happens to be. Do you have a couple of tips on how someone can kind of reset some of that and maybe do some of those things you talked about setting some parameters around what you do and what you don't do?
Yeah, I think the first thing would be to look at what a normal week in your life looks like and then figure out what you can cut out or minimize in order to make time for the things that you want to prioritize but aren't. There's
Yeah,
always things that you can reduce or remove if you choose to. It's so easy to make excuses,
yeah,
but that's really where it comes down. What can you switch or take out in order to put something in? And I think the biggest thing is to remember it's not always going to be fun and it's certainly not always going to be easy. It's not supposed to be. Doing
yeah.
anything, achieving anything is not supposed to be easy.
Yes,
So
that's super important for people to understand that it's like it's not going to be all the easy stuff if you want to be able to do that. So you can't pick all the easier ones. So
no, if you want it to be easy, then you're not going to hit your goals.
right, right. Um, for people that are listening, they've got a little bit about kind of your background from that standpoint. What what would people even who know you? I know a few people we've talked to know you pretty well and everything on the podcast. But what is something that might surprise somebody about you? What did other than croissants, obviously, they know now that that's something
My
that you
entire
really enjoy.
personality.
Yeah, what is something that that really is like, oh, I had no idea that was Katie.
Oh gosh. I'm a huge nerd, but I guess you might infer that from being a lawyer. I don't, but like huge nerd. Uh, like give me all things fantasy, Lord of the Rings. Like we will deep dive. It will be far too long of a conversation. You'll probably be exhausted by it. I run a book club. Everyone on Instagram knows that because I just huge nerd.
Yeah,
Like
well,
biggest nerd.
that's part of the reason you're probably super successful at all the other things because you can kind of diverge into other areas when you need to too. So that's a good thing. Um, so if people are looking to, okay, we're gonna follow Katie as she gets ready for kind of High Rocks events and cheer her on, but also see a little more about what you do and be inspired by that. What would be some of the ways to do that?
Instagram is for sure the best. I don't have Facebook. I don't have whatever Twitter is. I don't have Snapchat. I one thing that makes it a little easier to do all these things is to minimize social media time.
Yep.
So just Instagram. And it's literally my name. My handle is my name.
All right. What we'll do is we'll put that in the show notes too. So if you didn't get that, you can just go into the show notes, click through, follow, and see all the great things that are going on there. And if you haven't hit subscribe on the podcast, do that now. We have great people every week, just like Katie. But again, super full agenda, I'm sure, for you all the time. So really appreciate you taking a few minutes with us, Katie. It's been great to know more about you and to know you're in Calgary and it's colder than it is where I am in Toronto today. So that's kind of nice. I've got sun. You're not so much today, but I'm sure that'll shift. That'll shift soon and be just as cold here. Well, not just as cold. It's going to always be colder where you are. But again, thanks for taking the time with us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you again for having me.
All right. And to everybody else, we will talk again on Big Idea, Big Moves.